Hello, my creative friend. Do not forget that on Wednesdays we have bite-sized videos, a dose of inspiration to help you on your creative journey, aside from these longer form episodes on Mondays. And also, thank you very much for clicking that like button right now before you minimize the tab and get to your creative work. Now go create something amazing and enjoy the episode. Your Creative Push, episode 359.
I think you'll be surprised to find that if you do push yourself, that you'll probably be a lot more comfortable than you think you are.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Kasey Golden. Kasey is an illustrator and YouTuber with the dream of illustrating children's books. She shares her illustrations, her challenges, and her process as an artist on her YouTube channel, where she has over 1 million subscribers following her journey. And Kasey comes on the show today to talk about how her YouTube channel and the schedule that she made for it kept her accountable for creating art, and why she initially started her 500 Drawing Prompts Challenge. She also shares how she incorporates her community into her own challenges and what she's learned from them. Kasey offers her advice for getting past art block and also for getting past same-face syndrome and how to deal with negative comments and criticism. She also reveals how she honed in on her style, how she schedules her time, where she finds inspiration, and why she does challenges such as the How Small Can You Draw challenge and painting with her own blood. She discusses the importance of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and why you shouldn't wait until you're ready to put your work out there. And finally, Kasey talks about her passion for sewing, her take on nudity in art, and how drawing and painting traditionally helps her to embrace her art, her mistakes, and her confidence. So without further ado, please sit back, relax, put those earphones in, and enjoy my conversation with Kasey Golden. Kasey, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. You're a great artist, but you have really kind of found your stride, I guess, and your voice through your YouTube channel. What you do, I think, is really great. So I'm happy to have you on the show and kind of pick your mind about your creative process.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yay! Well, maybe for people that might not know who you are, could you kind of set the stage and tell us how you got to the point you are today, creatively speaking?
So originally, I've always posted my artwork online, as most people do. I like to share my artwork, and YouTube was just another social media platform for me to not only share my artwork, but also specifically share my process on how I get to like an end result for my art. So I've always liked to post on YouTube as a teenager, but it wasn't until I moved to Canada, when I wasn't legally allowed to work, that I really started to focus on posting a regularly scheduled video art stuff every week. So that really kept me motivated to create when I didn't have a job, because otherwise I was spending a lot of time playing video games. So having a schedule and being held accountable for this weekly upload schedule was really what kept me going, and then it just kind of went from there.
Yeah, I think that the self-imposed deadlines are the most important. It's
sure.
Funny how like you kind of create or at least this is what happened for me. Like you create a schedule for yourself. You're like, this is like the minimum, the bare minimum I'm going to put out. When I started the podcast, it was 5 episodes a week, which is way too much.
Oh my gosh.
But you can kind of settle in. But it's amazing how, like, especially when some other, a job or other responsibilities kind of fade away, it's like you have to almost not necessarily turn it into a job, like feeling like a job, but at least with the deadlines, at least with kind of the self-imposed aspect of it.
Right. Yeah, I think I definitely work best when I have deadlines and structure and specific goals.
Yeah, and you did this 500 prompts thing that's been kind of going on for a little while, and you recently you didn't quit it, but you changed it up. And
Right.
Could you tell that story? Because I take a lot of inspiration from being able to reevaluate things.
Sure. So the 500 drawing prompt series was something I picked up because I was feeling just a little uninspired, I guess, and I just wanted something to push myself outside of my comfort zone to draw something that I don't normally draw. So there's this book called 500 Drawing Prompts where there are 500 words or prompts, and some of the pages have multiples. So I thought it would be really fun instead of just drawing each word individually, I would combine all of the words on one single page and challenge myself to come up with like a unique illustration or idea using those combination of words. So it was something I was doing weekly for a while, but I think it's just kind of become less inspiring lately. So I've just had to take a little step back from it and take it as I want to, I suppose. But it's been really fun, especially with my community, because eventually I invited everyone to draw along with me. And it's just been so fun to see how differently and creatively everyone thinks with these one or two or four words.
I love that aspect of it because that's one of the struggles that we've been talking about on the show a lot recently is like, social media allows for you to share your art and to kind of build the community. But once you have the community, it's like, how can you really like incorporate the other people, like incorporate your followers and the people that are following what you do, incorporate them and make them feel like more than just a follower. So I love what you
Right.
do. And I think that that's a great takeaway for people who haven't checked out at least those videos where you actually, you scroll through all the art and feature certain ones that you really had something good to say about it or maybe some critiques. I think that's a really, really key takeaway from what you do.
Yeah, I definitely miss that the most about the series, but I think I don't know, it just got kind of boring for a little bit, but I miss that community feeling of that series.
For sure. Well, like the reason that wanted to ask you about that and I take so much inspiration from it is because, like, especially when you do set up those self-imposed deadlines or you start a challenge and a 500, 500 is a lot. That's a big number. It doesn't really seem like it, but when you're in the middle of it and you finish maybe like 20, you're like, "Oh my God." It's really hard to stop or to pivot or to change or to slow down because it feels like you're throwing in the towel. It feels like a failure. I have definitely experienced that in the past where I'm super apologetic when I say, okay, 5 podcast episodes is too much. Let's cut it down to 2 or eventually down to 1 a week. And nobody, when you do it and you're honest about it, you realize that everybody's like on board with you. They don't want you to like go crazy and they want, they'd rather have quality content than just a bunch of crap that you're putting out just to kind of meet that quota that you now feel like you have to live up to. And maybe it even feels terrible to do it. It's really evaluating how you feel about the thing.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I hate quitting and I hate giving up on things, and I will torture myself mentally to finish any art project it seems, especially when it comes to things like Inktober.
Mm-hmm.
I will push through, but I'm always happy that I do.
Right. Well, you mentioned that you started that whole challenge because you were feeling uninspired. Was that due to
Right.
like art block or?
Yes, actually, it was because of art block.
Okay. So it worked.
Yeah, it definitely got me out of it.
Have you had any other experiences with art block in the past or since then where you're able to get out of it from a certain way, or like what's your strategy aside from, starting a 500 drawing challenge?
Oh man, I am not unfamiliar with art block, unfortunately. I feel like I kind of run into it like once a year. I think my biggest advice when it comes to art block is to just take a step back from what you're doing and do not force art, because if there's anything that will make it worse, it's trying to force you to do something that you're just really not feeling like doing. If you feel like you can't draw and you continue to draw things that look bad, it's just going to, I think, demotivate you. So my biggest advice and what I always do is if I'm starting to feel that burnout or that art block is that I just take a step back and do something fun, something relaxing, do something that isn't creative with my brain and just try to turn that off and relax a little bit. And usually that solves it. I'll start getting that itch where I'm just like, I need to draw right now. So I think just taking a step back is the best thing for that.
And does it always come down to, like, as far as knowing when to come back, does it always come down to getting a little bit of the itch? Like, how do you know when it's too soon? How do you know when it's too late? Like, what if the itch doesn't come?
Well, it's funny you should ask because I feel like I've been going through that right now, actually. I feel like I've been having an art block for a few months, and I have kind of got past that waiting stage, and I'm kind of getting into that I think I need to force it stage
Hmm.
because I am such a workaholic. I think I do thrive off of like a lot of deadlines and being super busy and just working way too hard. But I think at a point it starts to become too much. So I think I'm having to try to find that balance of working really hard but not too hard. So I'm at the moment I'm forcing myself to push through some block, and I think I'm starting to get back into the rhythm of, I guess, motivating myself to work because I am working. It's a very stupid cycle. I think I don't want to work, but I won't work until I work.
Right.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but I think sometimes you do have to push yourself just through it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when things are like going okay, like when you're, like you said, keeping yourself super busy, I think that's very important. But how do you kind of keep track of it? Do you schedule your day? Do you schedule your week or month?
I don't schedule too much. I have a weekly planner, so I definitely have a lot of lists. I live off of lists because I
Mm.
always have so much to do, so many things to keep track of, too many emails. So I don't schedule the month, but I definitely go week by week because things change so much.
Right. And how you mentioned lists. How about like lists of goals? I know you've mentioned that before as far as like motivation for artists, like to get that kind of like long term or short term sort of carrot at the end of the stick, so to speak. So do you have like lists of goals?
I actually don't really do goals. I like to focus on only one or two goals at a time because I just feel like if I spread myself too thin when it comes to something like a goal, that maybe I would have trouble focusing on it. So at the moment, aside from YouTube being my job, my main goal right now is to create a children's book. So instead of working on several different, I guess, goals, my one goal is just to work on the book and just get that done.
Hmm. I had that goal as well for the past like 3 or 4 years to write a Your
Oh,
Creative Push book. But it's funny how like you're talking about like when you start something that's not necessarily, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't know how your YouTube channel was for you, like when it started taking off, where it's like, all right, now I got this other like plate that I got to keep spinning, or it's like all these other priorities. I got to make art, I got to make YouTube videos, I got to make podcast episodes, whatever it may be, where all these other things sort of seem to come before like that number one goal. At least that's what happened for me.
yeah, I think YouTube definitely took over my life a little bit, which I'm not super happy with, but also it is my job, so I feel like it's good that I'm putting priority on it, but I definitely want to find that balance between a passion project and my job.
And how does that look like for you, like on a weekly basis? Do you have like days that are devoted to YouTube and then like one day a week goes strictly to the book, or how does that work?
Well, I haven't gotten there quite yet, but I am hoping to set more time aside for my book. I'm still trying to get back into the groove of working on a schedule because I've gotten kind of thrown off between travel and the whole climate of today.
Yeah.
But I do want to focus a whole day on just working on my passion project, but I do mostly work on YouTube every day.
Now, you mentioned that when you started YouTube, it was like a way to show your process. Since you started that, like the act of unpackaging, like your process and figuring out exactly like how it is that you do what you do, have you found that that's changed the way that you approach art, or the way that your art looks, or the way that you think about art?
That's a good question. I think I went into YouTube just wanting to be honest about my process, but I think it's definitely shown that there can be a lot of pressure when it comes to people watching your process, and I think I'm really trying to not change the way I work because of YouTube and just try to focus on what's best for me and like my process for art. So maybe it's not more so that it did change me, but I'm trying to stick to how I do things. Because having an audience watch you and put yourself out there like that can be, I think, a little too much pressure. But I am trying to
Right.
stick to like what I love and what I like, and try not to change, I guess.
Right. You mentioned before in one of your videos about having like a list of things that maybe hold you back for upcoming artists, people that are working on their skills, like that are finding art block or finding just difficulty, just taking the time to kind of critically think about the different maybe fears that they have or life elements that might be holding them back, like maybe playing video games too much or
Right.
watching too much TV. Like, what are some of yours that maybe you have now, fears or resistances, or maybe you've gotten past them, maybe ones that have held you back in the past?
I think video games is probably the main one. I think if I do try to force myself to relax, which I do have a hard time doing sometimes because I work so much, when I do finally let myself relax, it becomes too much. So I definitely have a hard time balancing things. So either I work too hard and don't let myself relax, or I finally let myself relax and then I'm not working.
Right. You've also done a bunch of challenges. Like you've done a draw small challenge. I don't know if it was necessarily like a challenge, but you drew with your own blood, like you painted with your own blood. So is that just a way to like shake things up, or is that just to kind of like create new and interesting content for your followers?
Well, the two examples you mentioned were actually just things I was genuinely curious about for my personal art. There are some YouTube challenges where they're kind of like a fad and like everyone does them, and it's just like something that every artist does on YouTube because it's what you do. But there's definitely a few ideas that pop into my head that I just want to do. Like the how small can I draw challenge was how my YouTube channel even took off to begin with. It was a new challenge in the art community. It was something that anyone could do, but it was just something I was curious about because I have a tendency to draw smaller for some reason. And I just thought it was so cute. And I just thought, hey, how small can I draw? And it just took off. And then with the blood one, I just wanted to paint with my blood. But that's it. That's actually probably my most favorite video I've ever made because it was just so interesting. And I just really enjoyed the process. And it was weird.
Right. Yeah, in the beginning of that video, you're like, if you're squeamish with blood, like, obviously don't watch this video titled, watch me paint with my own blood. And I was like, nah, that's fine. I don't have any problems with blood. But then you're like, kind of squeezing it out into your palette. I'm like,
Yeah, a lot of people clicked through thinking, oh, she's not actually going to do it. And they were like, oh, I'm out. I can't do this.
It's pretty cool, though. Did you sell that piece, or like, where is that
Oh,
piece?
no, I still have it. I feel
Good.
like I can't sell it. It would be kind of weird.
No, of all the pieces, that's probably the one that you're not allowed to. But so you mentioned, like your fans or your followers or your watchers, your viewers, being a part of kind of the experience and trying to incorporate them. I was wondering, like, have you learned any lessons from speaking with so many varied artists about their fears or their struggles or even their successes? Like, what have you gained from building your community?
It's definitely interesting to see just how different everyone's art journey is, just because some people learn a lot faster or they learn slower or they have different goals. Like, I'm sure, as you know, my art style is very simple. It's very cartoony. Some people seem to think that more realistic art is the way to go, or a mix in between the two. And it's just interesting to see that even though we're all creative, we all have different goals, but we can also all sort of relate in a way that we're all sort of going through the same thing, trying to make it in a creative field, and also just the influences everyone gets. I think it's just been really fun to watch. And especially if I find like a younger artist and I talk to them and I follow them, it's just really fun to also watch them grow as an artist. And it's been a lot of fun.
That's been one of my favorite experiences as well, is seeing people go from what they're creating 4 years ago to what they're making now. And it's just, it's kind of like reaffirming the belief that I have that like all it really does take is just, time and dedication and putting in the work. You will get there. And it doesn't seem like it from like one day to the next, but from 1 month to the next and from 1 year to the next, you can make so much progress and like really up your game. So that's inspiring to see.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed watching some young artists grow up, and it's just been so fun watching their journey. They're like my little babies.
Well, you mentioned your own style, and you mentioned blocky. It's like different than a lot of the trends, I would say. And you've even mentioned that is like how tempting it is to, when everybody seems to be like following another influencer and kind of conforming their style to somebody else's. It's like you're just becoming one of the crowd. And I think you how did you say it? It's like, if you don't do you, who's going to do you?
Yeah.
So could you talk about that a bit and how you've honed in on your style and been confident enough to kind of go down the path of what makes Kasey Golden?
Sure. So, I mean, I definitely follow trends. I'm not against it or anything, but I'm really into just everyone having their own unique voice and style with art. And it's good to take inspiration. My art style, I always say, is definitely a Frankenstein monster of all of the influences and things that I enjoy in life. But when it boils down to it, I think each individual person has their own experiences that kind of come together into a pot to make their own style. So I think it's really good to follow what is popular for, if you do graphic design, like it's good to know what clients are looking for. But I think for the most part, it's really good to stay true to something that you enjoy and things that you want to see in your own artwork. So sometimes I do go on social media and I scroll through and I see all this like, I wish my art looked like that, or I wish I did things like that. But in the end, I do things a certain way that other people don't do. And who's going to fill in that Kasey shaped hole other than Kasey? So I think it's been really good for me to try to focus on what I can bring to the art world as far as my art and style is, and just focus on that as much as I do want to do something that maybe I like the look of more. I think it's good to focus on what you can do. Otherwise, who's going to do it other than you?
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. And that's one of the dangers of social media, of Instagram. It's like so easy to, instead of just creating, your own work and creating your own style, to just endlessly scroll through Instagram and see all the things that you wish you could be like. And it becomes super overwhelming, especially if you kind of live in that moment of being kind of a consumer. And there's so many good art. There's so many people in the world. Obviously, there's going to be so many great artists. So it's not like you're going to keep scrolling and finally like reach the end of the feed. And it's like, all right, that's all the good art that there is. Go do your own work, create your own style. So it's like finding that balance of, not being on there too long, finding inspiration, sure, but, honing in on your own style.
Exactly.
You've mentioned same face syndrome before too, where all of your faces look the same, like you're almost like fall too far into your own style.
Right.
Would you have any tips for anybody to get past that?
Oh, geez, that's a tough one. I think there was this really fun challenge that went around quite a while, not a while ago, but maybe like a year ago, called the 100 Faces Challenge, which I started to do, but then I stopped doing. I think it was more of an exercise for people to draw realistic faces, like actual artistic studies, but I took it as a way to focus on really silly expressions and really push the boundaries of the anatomy of a face and I guess the proportions, and just really make goofy, crazy looking faces. And I think that's always a really fun exercise that gets me out of doing what I normally do all the time. So just really trying to push the weird and the ugly and the crazy and do something that I guess isn't supposed to be. So a nose isn't supposed to be a pointy triangle, but I'm going to draw a nose as a pointy triangle because it's fun and it pushes the boundaries and crazy eye shapes and just trying different things. So I think if you just sit down and doodle things and push the boundaries, it could probably help you get out of the same face situation. But I'm still guilty of it.
No, I mean, like, it makes sense. Like, everybody's guilty of it. And kind of like we were talking about before, it's like you got to, sort of hone in on your own style that is, Kasey Golden, that is Youngman Brown, that is whoever it is that's listening. But I love that advice. Like, even if, doing a challenge, or even if you have to create your own challenge, like just give it some random hashtag like 50 whatever. When you can label something as an experiment or like going out of your comfort zone, it almost lets you off of the hook. Like, okay, this doesn't have to look good necessarily. Like, this is just an attempt. So it kind of like gives you that freedom then to just go wild, to really experiment.
Oh, for sure. That's honestly part of what gets me out of art block sometimes, is taking the pressure off of completing something and making a finished product, is just doodling and having fun with your artwork instead of putting the pressure of creating something good.
Yeah. So much of this art experience, I think, is that balance of having fun or doing something that turns into a job. Like, you start a YouTube channel, you start a podcast, you start whatever, and it's fun at first and you're doing it to kind of expand your horizons. But then when you start to reach some sort of success, or you at least get into kind of a groove, it can begin inevitably to feel like a job, or it can feel like, I don't feel like thinking of a podcast episode or a YouTube video or a sketch. Like, I don't feel like doing that today. And it's like trying to walk that balance of challenging yourself, but not being too challenged by stipulations that you've set for yourself. So any way that you can find that keyword fun to bring the fun back in, I think is number one.
Yeah, that's what made me very hesitant about wanting to do art as a job when I was growing up, because I enjoyed it so much and I felt like it was something I would like to do forever, but then I didn't want to ruin the fun by making it something I had to do.
Yeah, losing the magic.
Yeah.
Would you have any tips for artists or advice for artists, or really anybody that is maybe has like their secret sketchbook, they're working on their art, they're maybe a little bit fearful of what other people will think, especially when they follow such great artists, and they're just afraid to post their work. They're afraid to maybe start an Instagram account or post maybe their experimental stuff, to just really like let all their stuff out there. Would you have any advice for anybody about that?
Well, I'll say this. You'll never be ready to post. You'll never be ready to start that book. You'll never be ready. If you're gonna wait until you're ready, it's probably never going to happen. So you just have to give yourself that push. And I think one of the biggest things about art is getting yourself out of your comfort zone. If you stay inside your comfort zone and you never push yourself outside of it, you're probably never going to reach those goals. You're never going to do anything that you wouldn't normally do. And I think you'll be surprised to find that if you do push yourself, that you'll probably be a lot more comfortable than you think you are. I think a lot of things just seem a lot more scary than people think they are, obviously because they're just scared for no reason. But if they push themselves, I feel like that's all you have to do, is just give yourself that little push and you can do it.
No, you're speaking my language, push.
Oh, there you go.
Well, no, I totally agree. Yeah, it's often the thing we're afraid of is it's like worst case scenario and like the harshest critics that you could ever imagine that really don't exist. So it's really just ripping the Band-Aid off, trying it once. Most likely, like, you're going to be met with crickets, not with
right.
with sneering like critics. So just don't fear the critics or the crickets.
Yeah, you're your worst critic anyway.
Right.
Take it from me.
No, I hear you. Can you actually talk about nudity?
Oh gosh.
Question that I've never asked anyone ever before,
Oh
but
wow.
I know you've talked about that in the past, about society's view on nudity and artists' view on nudity. So I was wondering if you could just kind of expand on that.
Sure. I don't know if it's just because I'm too lazy to draw clothes on my characters, but I really enjoy drawing just like nude characters or characters where like there's like their clothes are coming off a little bit and they're like revealing an under boob or something. I just think it's silly, especially as someone who wants to become a children's book illustrator. If I ever draw something a little bit inappropriate, I'm met with, "Oh, and you want to be a children's book illustrator and you're drawing a butt?" I think it's kind of silly to put artists in these blocks where they aren't allowed to do anything outside of what they want to do, but also nudity, everyone has a body, and I just find it so bizarre that we have completely restricted a body to being sexualized, and it just is the weirdest thing to me. Because I don't like to draw romantic things. Like, I'm not really into romantic things or relationships. If I'm drawing someone naked, it's just because they are. And
Right.
everyone just wants to label it as sexualized or just inappropriate. And it just is so confusing to me. I wish we could get past that, which is strange because art used to be a lot of nudity, and now it seems like we don't like it anymore for some reason. I don't know.
Once those fig leaves came into no, I agree. And you even mentioned in one of your videos, yeah, like, do people get disgusted when they're walking outside and they see a male dog? Like,
Oh gosh, that one. I don't ask why I draw dog wieners. I think it's just like a fun little like angle to throw on a dog somewhere sometimes. But whenever
yeah,
I draw just like that little triangle coming off of a dog, people lose their minds, and I'm like, you're gonna point at me for drawing it, but at the same time, you can't stop looking at it and commenting about it. So I don't know.
I think, well, this is a good point to ask you then. How do you get past especially when you have so many people that are looking at your art, how do you get past then, like, opinions that to you don't necessarily hold weight, where you're like, I still want to, like, I don't want to be put in a box, like, I don't want to be held back or like censored, or like, I don't want to have to not create the art that I want to create. Do you just simply just try to ignore those people? Because I know that would weigh on me. That would weigh on a lot of people, especially with a smaller following, that they're like, oh, this one guy said he doesn't like I'm showing a little bit of dog private parts. Like, so I'll stop doing that. Like, how do you push past that and do the art that you know you want to do and that you're meant to do, but one or two or many people are saying, oh, I don't like that?
It definitely it definitely gets on my nerves a little bit. I'm someone that can get easily irritated, but I'm also one of those people where if someone gets annoyed by me doing something, then I'm going to do it even more.
Yeah,
So
yes.
the more comments I get like, ew, a dog wiener, the more I'm like, well, I guess the next few dogs I draw are going to have wieners because I'm going to keep doing it until you get used to it because that's what I do. So I think, especially like as a larger creator, someone who's small, they get maybe like one bad comment out of 10. But with a larger creator, because there are so many more comments, I guess there are more negative ones. But I think it's just something I'm still learning to do, is just ignoring the useless negative comments or ones that try to challenge who I am and change who I am. Because, like I said, I really want to stick to who I am and do my art the way I want to do it and not have that influence from other people telling me what I should or shouldn't be doing with it.
Right. Yeah, I have a mentality of giving haters or giving negative comments like 1 second, like just an initial read of it to see if there's anything there, like to see if there's actually some constructive criticism there or
Right.
something that I should consider, thinking about it for a moment or two, and then just kind of slowly giving them the middle finger and either deleting them or just kind of trying to put them out of my mind. It's really tough, but I think it's like exposure therapy. The more you get, the more you realize that life goes on and there's going to be 10 to 100 positive comments for every negative comment and trying to be okay with it.
Right. Yeah, it is hard to look at the more negative looking comments and find that there is some truth in them, because I know that my art does have a long way to go. There are things that don't work, and I do appreciate the criticism, but sometimes there are just some useless, negative, or just like downright crazy comments that you just have to learn to ignore and move on from, unfortunately.
Well, if a troll's not going to troll, who's going to troll, you know?
Yeah, you gotta have some struggles in life, I suppose.
You also do some sewing too.
I do.
Is that still a big part of your kind of art repertoire?
Sewing has always been sort of like a secondary passion for me. I would probably call it more of a hobby than like my main focus for creativity. So like obviously drawing is my main one, but I think everyone has a few hobbies under their belt. So sewing is definitely one of those things that I don't necessarily do all the time, but it's something that I'll get the itch to pick up and just kind of go crazy with it every once in a while. And it is very creative. So I've been having a lot of fun, especially now that YouTube is my job. I've been finding different ways to be creative with sewing. I started off by making cosplay, like costumes for like anime conventions. I did a couple of those, and then
like full ones that you wear, or
yes.
Wow, cool.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna regret spilling those beans. Maybe one day I'll show those
Spill
photos.
them.
Oh gosh, I mean, there's
That's
nothing
awesome.
there's nothing crazy there, but the photos were. Let's just say I've aged like a fine wine. I did not look good like 5 years ago.
No.
But yeah, I've always really enjoyed being creative and just creating something with my hands, especially because art is so flat. You can create in a more 3D medium. So I keep saying sew, and then I think sewing. It's just been really fun to, like I said with YouTube, I've found a different way to incorporate the sewing into like a more creative way. So I used to just like sew cactus, which I made a few tutorials on, but now I've had some videos where I create and illustrate like a flat illustration, but like layered felt pieces, and that was so much fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's sometimes very necessary to have that like other outlet where it's completely different than the thing that you do on a daily basis. So like you can still kind of fulfill that creative itch like on a day off, but there's also something to be said about creating something three-dimensional, something that you can like tangibly hold in your hands too.
Yeah.
So that must be very satisfying.
Yeah, I think that's one reason why I moved from digital art to watercolor illustration also, is that at the end I have something to hold, and it's just like really cool to say I created this thing.
Right. And I've also seen you do like a live stream drawing. I think you're using Procreate, but you're talking about how the delete button or like the undo button or like the go back can just put you in this sort of like loop where you just don't move on.
Yeah.
Is that a big difference that you find too with painting traditionally and in the real world and then painting on the computer?
Yeah, that's actually the whole reason why I moved from digital art to watercolor illustration, is that I just found myself spending way too much time on digital art because I used Adobe Illustrator, so you can manipulate every single line at every single point until it's exactly how you want it. So I was just spending just far too much time editing every tiny little line the way I wanted it, and I was like, it's just ridiculous how little I get done. So I moved to traditional art so that when you put down that ink line, what's done is done and you have to move on. And I find that I'm just way more productive and I can do way more. And also I feel like it helps you get over the mistakes and embrace your art, and you feel less scared, especially when it comes to things like Inktober. You don't have that fear of putting down a permanent line because you're kind of used to it. And I think it also really helps with your confidence as an artist too, which still working on.
Right. Well, is that perfectionism? Is that something that has like kind of found its way into other aspects of your creativity? Like even making YouTube videos, like do you have to edit it perfectly, or I struggle with that.
Yeah, I'm definitely a perfectionist, and I get hung up on small details and everything needing to be perfect. But I think, yeah, traditional art has definitely helped me to be able to move on and accept that not everything is going to be exactly perfect. What's that quote? Finished, not perfect.
Finished, not perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a really good one to live by, honestly.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, just having like a product, something that you can put that completed label on and just not just for the fact of like having it done, but just being able to mentally move on to the next thing. It'll just jumpstart your creative output so much because you can be a person that starts something with the intention of finishing it, not just getting it completely flawless.
Yeah, I all of my Inktobers are finished, not perfect.
Good, good. Well, I mean, it makes sense because Jake Parker's the one that created
Yeah,
that
I thought
both things,
so.
both the quote and the and the challenge. So
I
wow,
thought that was his quote, but I was like, I don't want to missay that.
yeah. I was wondering before we get to the final push, do you have any resources or anything that really brings you inspiration when you're lacking it, maybe that maybe would bring us inspiration too?
Inspiration. Where do I go for inspiration? I definitely have a folder on my computer called Inspiration where when I'm just browsing social media and there's shapes or colors that I'm particularly into, I will save them. But as far as showing other people, go for a hike, go out and see the world. I think the biggest inspiration you can get for your art is probably having experiences. So I would say just go out and see the world. Go for a walk. You never know where you can find inspiration, honestly.
Right. And sometimes you need to like almost not be looking for it so you can both take a break, like we were talking about before,
Exactly.
by going out, but also, being on call to find that inspiration when it strikes. So,
Yeah.
um, Kasey, this has been awesome, but it's time for the final push. And
Aw.
that's where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today and just give them your best final words of advice and push them to pursue their own creative passions.
I guess my best quote at this point is if you're not going to do you, who's going to do you? So you gotta push yourself to do you.
Absolutely. The world needs, I say that at the end of my videos, like the universe needs your creations and you are the universe. It's not just like your unique voice, like who's going to do you. It's not just your own unique take on the world and your art, but it's also for you as well. Like you need to have that output to figure out what this existence is. So you owe it to yourself as well.
I wish I was a motivational speaker, but you're much better than me.
No, not at all. Kasey, thank you so much for coming on the show today, for sharing your story and giving us that inspiration today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
For everybody listening, you can find Kasey on YouTube. She is Kasey Golden, and that's with a K, Kasey, Golden. And we'll have everywhere else you can find her at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/359. Kasey, thanks again.
No way. Thank you.
My thanks once again to Kasey for taking the time out of her busy schedule to come on the show today. And there was two major quotes that she said that I think need to be recounted here at the end so that you can make sure that you take them with you on your creative journey. And the first is, if you wait until you're ready, it's probably never going to happen. And I think that this is a quote that we all inherently know, but we all ignore anyway. I am definitely guilty of this in any endeavor that I ever embark upon, creative or otherwise, that requires a certain amount of effort or a certain amount of trying to get to my higher self, whether it's losing weight or working out again or applying for jobs or putting yourself out in the world in any way. It's one of the trickiest forms of resistance is that self-talk that you're not ready today, but maybe tomorrow, maybe in a couple days, let's get this stuck in a line and this stuck in a line and this stuck in a line. And then you'll be ready to put yourself out there. Then you'll be ready to become a better human being or to advance your creative calling or whatever it is. Anything that's difficult and requires a bit of vulnerability or a bit of effort, we talk ourselves into waiting until you're ready. And one of the lessons that we've learned on this podcast so many times is the fact that you're never going to be ready. You're never going to have that feeling of, okay, I'm at the point now where everything's in line. My life is in order and everything is ready for me to actually make this effort, to actually put myself out there. Because the goalposts keep moving, your taste keeps increasing, but your anxiety and your fear never subside. They never go away. So there's never going to be that perfect moment. So you just have to do it now. You just have to do it today, or else, like Kasey said, it's probably never going to happen. And that also relates to the second quote, which I think you know what it's going to be. It's, if you're not going to do you, then who's going to do you? It relates to the first quote because so often, instead of being a producer and putting ourselves out there, our truest selves out there, we instead become a consumer and we go on Instagram, we scroll through the feed and try to find that artist or that creative person that is doing exactly what we want to do, what we in our hearts know is our kind of style. So we try to find that artist to either give us the excuse to not do it because it already exists, or to see how great these other artists are, to give ourselves the excuse to not do it because we'll never be as good as them. But Kasey's point is that there's nobody in the universe that's going to create exactly as you create or potentially will create. The combination of all of your influences, of all of your life experiences, and all of your interests will mesh together this completely unique artist, this completely unique person that is you. And you know in your heart that you are the only one that can do that. Because if you keep waiting to be your truest self, if you keep waiting to have the bravery to put your true voice out there, it will never happen. And we need your creations. We need your unique voice. And more importantly than any of that, you need your creations and you need your unique voice. On our next episode, we have Talia Jackson. Talia is a series regular on Netflix's Family Reunion, and with production currently on hold because of the coronavirus, she's focusing on her music career and is producing and releasing music directly from home. And this was a very timely conversation, an important conversation, not just because of what's going on with the coronavirus and quarantine and artists being stuck at home, but also race and the unique challenges that she has faced. If you want to find out more about Talia, you can head to her Instagram. She is Talia Jackson Official. And we'll have links to where you can find her music as well at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/359. But that's all I've got for you today. So hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. I love you all so much. Go and create some amazing work because the universe deserves your creations and you are the universe. We'll see you next week. Hey YouTubers, if you like this episode, I handpicked another one for you. I think you'll like it just as much. Just click it right there on the left side of your screen. And on the right is a playlist of episodes from guests that came from the same creative field as the one that you just listened to. And please don't forget to hit that like button on your way out before it goes away. Enjoy the next episode.